Have you ever thought about a language born not from borders or conquest, but from a dream? A dream of peace? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. The absolutely incredible story of Esperanto, the hopeful tongue. So, to really get why this language was even created, we have to travel back in time to its birthplace. And, well, it was a world just simmering with tension and mistrust. I want you to picture a city, Białystok, in what's now Poland. Back in the late 19th century, if you walked down the street, you'd hear Russian, Polish, Yiddish, and German. But these weren't just different sounds. They were like invisible walls between different communities, living right next to each other, but totally separate. And yeah, this wasn't some happy, diverse melting pot. It was deeply, deeply divided. Because they couldn't really talk to each other, suspicion grew, and that suspicion festered into real fear, which sometimes just boiled over into outright hatred.
This is where our protagonist comes in, a young Jewish boy named Ludwik Lazarus Zamenhof. He grew up seeing all this friction, all this conflict every single day, and it led him to a really profound conclusion. Language itself was one of the biggest barriers to people just understanding each other. He thought maybe, just maybe, a shared language could be the key to unlocking a shared humanity.
So what's a kid to do? He set out to build a solution. Not a treaty, not a new law, but a bridge. A bridge made entirely of words. He actually engineered a new language, designed from the ground up to connect people.
And then, in 1887, using the pen name Doctoro Esperanto, he published his first book. Now, the name he chose, Esperanto, literally means one who hopes. So this wasn't just a grammar textbook, right? It was a declaration, a hope for a much better world.
The way Esperanto was designed is just fascinating. See, unlike national languages that have all these weird quirks and irregularities from centuries of evolution, Esperanto was built for one thing: to be easy to learn. In fact, some studies suggest you can get conversational in Esperanto in about a quarter of the time it would take for a language like, say, French or Spanish.
And here's a huge key to that simplicity. Its alphabet is perfectly phonetic. It's got 28 letters, and one letter makes one sound always, no exceptions. The grammar is also completely regular. All nouns end in O, all adjectives end in A, and the verbs are conjugated with these simple, unchanging endings. It's kind of like linguistic Lego.
But Zamenhof's goal wasn't just to make an easy language. He wanted to create a neutral one. He imagined this common ground that didn't belong to any one nation or culture, and because of that, it could belong to everyone. It was designed to be a totally neutral meeting place.
But, an idea this radical, this international, was bound to run into some powerful enemies. The idealism of Esperanto was about to smash head-on into the cold, hard realities of politics and power.
At first, the language spread like wildfire. By 1905, they were holding the first World Esperanto Congress. After the horrors of World War I, it even got the attention of the brand new League of Nations. But then came the 1920s and 30s, and things took a very dark turn.
Okay, so here's the critical moment. A proposal was actually made to adopt Esperanto for international diplomacy, but it was vetoed, and by a single country, France. Why? Because they were afraid of losing the power and prestige that the French language held. Just like that, national interest shut down a global idea.
And from there, it got so much worse. The whole internationalist ideal of Esperanto made it a direct threat to tyrants. Nazi Germany condemned it because of its Jewish origins. In the Soviet Union, Stalin had Esperanto speakers arrested. When your idea is hated by both Hitler and Stalin, you're probably onto something pretty important.
Zamenhof himself actually died during World War I, and his dream of a united Europe was in ruins. And his language, well, it never became the global second language he'd hoped for. So, where does that leave us? Let's take a look at what Esperanto became instead. So, with all that opposition, does that mean it was all just a failure? Did the dream die? Well, not exactly. It transformed into something different, something maybe even more resilient. See, it didn't become the world language, but it became a world community, a living, breathing global network of people who chose to learn it not for a job, but because they really believed in the idea behind it. It has its own culture now, with native speakers, annual conferences, and a ton of original novels, films, and music. And we're not talking about some tiny historical footnote. Today, it's estimated that somewhere between 1 and 2 million people speak Esperanto. That makes it, by a huge margin, the most successful constructed language in history. The community might be smaller than the dream, but it is very, very real, and it has lasted.
Okay, so why does this story from the 1880s still feel so important today? Why does this particular hope just refuse to fade away? It's because the problem Zamenhof saw in his divided city, well, it's still our problem. In fact, maybe it's even worse. We see fractured communication in our online bubbles. We see the rise of nationalist divisions all over the world. Zamenhof's diagnosis is as relevant now as it ever was. And his solution, that core idea, is still incredibly powerful. This belief that we can tackle human division by intentionally creating a common ground, a neutral space that exists outside the interests of any one nation or empire. That need for shared spaces feels more urgent than ever.
Zamenhof called himself Dr. Hopeful. He might have underestimated just how hard it would be to bring people together, but as our source material puts it so beautifully, the hope was not misplaced. The hope is never misplaced. And it kind of leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? In our own fractured world, how can we build our own common ground?